A tense delivery in a wealthy neighborhood begins with a cruel public insult from a teenage girl. The moment freezes everyone nearby, with judgmental eyes turning toward the target. But in the midst of humiliation, a quiet act from the delivery, man hints that he's far more than he appears, and it leaves the crowd with a strange sense of anticipation. Did you get lost? Or do you just like delivering to the wrong kind of people? The words cracked through the warm afternoon air like a slap. Heads turned along the manicured driveway. A girl of maybe 16 stood leaning against a marble gatepost, phone in hand, her laughter slicing into the quiet. She wore an oversized designer hoodie, but the smirk on her face was sharper than any label she flaunted. The cul-de-sac was one of those perfect suburban pockets where every house looked like it belonged in a glossy magazine. Pristine lawns, imported roses, a fountain in the center that sprayed water high enough to catch the sun. The only sound before her voice had been the hum of cicadas and the low purr of a delivery van's engine. He stepped down from the van slowly. A man in his early 30s, tall, lean, wearing a brown delivery uniform that had seen its share of long shifts. His cap was pulled low, shadowing his face. His eyes swept the property, taking in every detail, the open garage with its expensive cars, the long French windows, the elderly woman watching from the upper balcony, her hand resting on the railing. The teen's arrogance was magnetic. It drew the attention of a few neighbors watering plants or taking out trash. Some smirked faintly, like they were entertained. Others simply stared. "You're not supposed to be here," she added, taking a slow sip from a sparkling water bottle. Packages for this address usually come from real delivery companies. Her tone carried that hollow confidence that came from knowing she could get away with anything. The man didn't flinch. He set the package on the driveway with careful precision, the way someone might place something fragile and valuable. He didn't meet her eyes at first, but when he finally did, there was no heat, just a calm, steady focus. "Guess I'm the wrong kind of delivery." "Then," he said quietly, voice even, almost kind. Her lips curled into a mock pout. "Ah, did I hurt your feelings? Poor thing. Maybe next time you can deliver in the neighborhoods you actually belong to." Somewhere above, the old woman on the balcony straightened ever so slightly. Her gaze sharpened, her fingers tightening on the railing. The man crouched, pulled a black pen from his pocket, and signed something on the package's surface. His handwriting was elegant, looping, entirely unnecessary for the delivery process. It was almost as if he wanted to leave a mark, a signature in more ways than one. "You ever notice," he said, almost to himself, "that the loudest people are usually the ones who know the least?" The girl's face flushed, but she masked it with another laugh. "Cute. You think that's going to make me apologize?" "Not happening." He didn't answer. Instead, he adjusted his cap, gave the slightest nod toward the balcony, and began walking back to his van. But before he could step inside, the air shifted. A sudden, piercing voice rang out from above. "James?" The sound wasn't angry. It was urgent, disbelieving, desperate. Every head in the cul-de-sac turned toward the elderly woman on the balcony. She had gripped the railing so hard her knuckles were white. Her voice cracked with emotion, the syllables shaking as though she had seen a ghost. The girl's laughter died instantly. She spun toward the balcony, eyes wide. "Grandma? You know him?" The man's step faltered, not a stumble, but the faint hesitation of someone who had been avoiding a moment for a very long time. His jaw tightened, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something in his eyes. The neighbors froze, sensing they were standing at the edge of something bigger than an afternoon insult. The fountain kept spraying. The cicadas kept humming. But the whole street felt like it was holding its breath. And James didn't turn around. Not yet. James stood by the van door, the metal warm beneath his palm. The sound of his name still hung in the air, trembling like an unanswered question. He had heard that voice before, softer than, without the tid salthadiden, without the tidin, so to that voice before, softer than, without the disatin, than without the ti. Strain, without the weight of years pressing down on it. The neighbors had stopped pretending not to watch. A man in gym clothes stood frozen halfway to his mailbox. A couple across the street paused their morning jog, earbuds dangling. The girl, still leaning on the marble post, looked between her grandmother and the delivery man like she'd stumbled into a scene she didn't understand. "James?" The old woman called again, softer this time, as if afraid the first. One had scared him away. He turned slowly, his shadow stretching long across the driveway. Her face was pale beneath her neatly styled silver hair, but her eyes were sharp, the kind that missed nothing. "I thought you." Her voice faltered. "It's been years." The girl's brow furrowed. "Grandma, what is going on? You know him?" James didn't answer. He walked toward the package he'd left by the gate, his boots making a steady thud against the stone. He crouched again, brushing his fingers along the ink of his signature, as if deciding whether to erase it or leave it for her to see. The old woman stepped back from the railing, vanishing from sight for a moment. A door slammed upstairs. Footsteps, hurried, unsteady, echoed inside the massive house. The girl glanced toward the sound, her confidence cracking. "Okay, seriously, what's happening?" James straightened and met her gaze. "Sometimes, kid," he said quietly, "you don't know who you're talking to." She opened her mouth to snap back, but the front door burst open before she could. The old woman emerged, clutching the doorway for balance, her chest rising and falling faster than it should. She descended the marble steps with surprising speed, ignoring the way the neighbors whispered behind their hands. When she reached the driveway, she stopped a few feet from James. Her eyes scanned his face, searching for proof, or maybe for pieces of a memory she'd been holding on to for far too long. "It's really you," she said finally, her voice thick. James tilted his head slightly, but didn't smile. "People change, Mrs. Cartwright." The girl blinked. "Mrs. Cartwright? That's you, Grandma. Wait, you know each other's names?" The old woman ignored her granddaughter, her attention fixed entirely on James. "Where have you been?" "All these years? Why didn't you?" She stopped herself, glancing briefly at the watching neighbors. Her voice lowered. "Why didn't you come back?" His jaw tightened. "You know why?" The air between them felt heavy, charged with something invisible but undeniable. The girl looked from one to the other, frustration bubbling up. "Okay. Seriously, can someone explain? Because one minute I'm just joking around with some delivery guy, and the next my grandma's acting like she's seen a ghost." James' eyes locked on hers. "Joking, huh?" His tone was calm, but it carried weight. "You've got no idea how many doors I've walked through, and you don't get to decide who belongs where." Her cheeks burned, though she tried to hide it with a roll of her eyes. "Whatever." Mrs. Cartwright's gaze softened. "James, will you at least come inside for a minute?" "Please." He hesitated. The logical thing was to refuse, to turn, step into the van, and drive away from the memories that were suddenly clawing at the edges of his mind. But something in her voice, that same note from years ago, rooted him in place. The neighbors still lingered, watching openly now. He knew that if he walked inside, whispers would spread faster than wildfire. He also knew that walking away would only leave more questions hanging. Finally, he sighed. 1 minute. The old woman's shoulders loosened with relief. She stepped aside, gesturing toward the front door. The girl trailed behind, still muttering under her breath, but her curiosity was evident in the way she kept glancing at him. As they crossed the threshold into the cool, polished interior of the Cartwright estate, James caught sight of a framed photograph in the entryway. faded but unmistakable. His stomach tightened. There he was, standing beside a younger Mrs. Cartwright, and between them, someone neither of them had mentioned. Yet, James's boots sank slightly into the thick cream carpet as he stepped inside. The air was cool, scented faintly with polished wood and something floral, expensive, restrained. His eyes moved instinctively, scanning the space the way someone does when they're on unfamiliar ground. Even though this place wasn't entirely unfamiliar. And then he saw it. The photograph sat on a narrow mahogany table in the entryway, propped inside an ornate gold frame. Faded with time, but still sharp enough to tell its story, a younger Mrs. Cartwright in a powder blue dress, her smile radiant, and beside her, a tall man in a military uniform, arm draped loosely around her shoulders. In front of them, a boy, barely 10 years old, wearing the same proud grin as the man. James stared at it too long. The girl noticed. "Why are you looking at that like it's yours or something?" she asked, moving past him to toss her phone onto a side chair. Mrs. Cartwright's eyes darted to the photograph, then back to him. "It's been there for decades," she said softly, almost apologetically. James's voice was low. "I remember the day it was taken." The girl laughed sharply. "Yeah, right. My dad wasn't even—" She stopped, frowning at her grandmother. "Wait, was he?" Mrs. Cartwright pressed her lips together. "Maybe we should sit down." James didn't move toward the sitting room. "You haven't told her anything, have you?" "No," Mrs. Cartwright admitted, her voice steady but weighted. She's too young to understand what happened, what we all lost." The girl crossed her arms. "I'm not too young. You guys are acting like there's some big secret here." James exhaled slowly, his gaze still locked on the photograph. "Secrets have a way of rotting the air they live in," he murmured. The girl gave him a skeptical look. "What is that supposed to mean?" He finally tore his eyes from the frame and turned to face her. "It means you don't get to mock people without knowing where they've been. And sometimes," he added, glancing briefly at Mrs. Cartwright, "where they've been is closer to you than you think." Mrs. Cartwright stepped forward, her hand brushing against the edge of the table. "James, I'm sorry. For that day. For all of it." His jaw flexed, but his voice stayed calm. "Sorry doesn't rebuild what was torn down." The girl's gaze bounced between them like she was watching a match she didn't know the rules of. "So, what? You guys are old friends? Relatives? What?" Mrs. Cartwright didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned toward the wide glass doors that opened to the back garden. Sunlight poured in, casting her in a golden halo that contrasted sharply with the tension in her voice. "Your father? He was only a teenager when he met James. They were inseparable for a time, like brothers." The girl's eyebrows shot up. "Wait, my dad knew you?" James's eyes darkened slightly. Memories stirring. He did. Until the world decided that was a problem. Mrs. Cartwright's expression faltered. It wasn't the world. It was people. People who thought they were protecting something by destroying it. Silence hung heavy for a moment. Outside, the sound of the fountain reached them faintly. Through the walls, the girl tilted her head, still frowning. "So you were, like, friends with my dad, and now you're a delivery guy?" The last word dripped with the same condescension she'd used earlier, though it lacked its earlier sharpness. James didn't rise to it. Life doesn't always take the road you planned. Sometimes someone else forces a detour. Mrs. Cartwright's hands tightened at her sides. "James, please, stay for tea. Let me explain everything before she says something else she can't take back." He hesitated, eyes drifting toward the photograph again. "Tea's not going to fix what happened." "No," she admitted. "But maybe it's a place to start." From the corner of his eye, James caught the girl watching him, not with the outright mockery from earlier, but with something sharper, almost suspicious, and as they moved toward the sitting room, the photograph stayed where it was, silent, but loaded, waiting for its story to be told. The sitting room felt like stepping into a painting. Sunlight spilled through tall drapes, landing in pools on the Persian rug. Every surface gleamed, the polished coffee table, the porcelain vases lined neatly along a mantel. The air was thick with the scent of lavender tea, faintly sweet and somehow oppressive. James sat stiffly on the edge of a leather armchair, cap still on, eyes fixed on a single point in the carpet. Across from him, Mrs. Cartwright lowered herself onto a cream sofa, her hands curling around a delicate teacup. The girl perched beside her, phone forgotten in her lap, her eyes flicking between them. "Your father," Mrs. Cartwright began slowly, "wasn't an easy boy to keep in line. He had his own ideas about the world, and they didn't always match mine. But when he met James—" She looked at him, a faint smile crossing her face before fading. "It was the first time I saw him truly light up." James's fingers drummed, once against the armrest. "We met in middle school," he said quietly. "He defended me the first week. A group of older kids thought I didn't belong in their basketball game. He told them if I wasn't playing, neither was he." The girl's eyes widened slightly. "Dad did that?" "He did," James replied, a faint warmth entering his voice. "We were different in a lot of ways. I didn't have much. He had, well, everything, but we didn't care. We just wanted to play ball, ride bikes, and dream bigger than the street we lived on." Mrs. Cartwright's gaze lowered. It wasn't as simple for the adults. People talked. They didn't like the idea of my son spending so much time outside his circle. "Outside his circle?" The girl repeated. James's eyes met hers. "She means outside his race." A flicker of discomfort crossed her face. Mrs. Cartwright's voice grew heavier. "I told him it didn't matter to me, but I wasn't brave enough to tell the others to stop. I thought I could keep the peace. I was wrong." James leaned back, his jaw tightening. "Peace for who?" "Not for me. Not for him." The girl shifted uncomfortably. "What happened?" Mrs. Cartwright's hands trembled slightly as she set the teacup down. "It was the summer before high school. There was an incident, something at the park. A man accused James of stealing his wallet. The girl looked at James sharply. "Did you?" His eyes narrowed. "No, but when someone with power points a finger, the truth doesn't always matter." Mrs. Cartwright nodded, her voice almost a whisper. "The police came. Your father tried to defend him. But it didn't matter. They took James away in front of the whole neighborhood." James's voice was flat now. 3 nights in a holding cell before they admitted they couldn't prove a thing. "But by then—" He trailed off, staring past them both, into a space only he could see. "By then," Mrs. Cartwright continued for him, "the damage was done. People whispered. Coaches stopped calling. Your father, he still visited him. But something had changed. They stopped letting him come around the house." The girl swallowed, her earlier arrogance gone, replaced by something quieter. "That's messed up." James let out a humorless laugh. "Messed up is one word for it." Mrs. Cartwright looked at him with regret, so deep it seemed to settle into her bones. "I should have fought harder. I should have told the truth louder, but I thought time would heal it. Instead, time just carried us further apart." The girl glanced at James, her voice hesitant. "So you didn't see each other again?" "Not until today," he said, "and I wasn't planning to." The room was silent except for the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Outside, the fountain spray caught the sunlight, throwing fragments of rainbow against. The glass dot. Mrs. Cartwright reached forward, placing her hand over his. "James, I know I can't change what happened, but maybe we can start again, even if it's just a conversation." He didn't pull away, But he didn't meet her eyes either. Conversations don't erase years. No, she said softly, but they can stop more damage from being done. From the corner of his eye, James caught the girl watching him, this time with no smirk, no defiance. Just quiet unease. And maybe the first flicker of understanding. James rose from the armchair, the decision made in his posture before he spoke a word. I should go. Mrs. Cartwright's lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't try to stop him. Will you think about coming back? He gave no promise, just a polite nod. The girl stayed silent, watching him like she wanted to say something, but couldn't find the right words. As he stepped into the warm afternoon air, the sound hit him first, the low hum of voices that swelled as soon as the front door closed behind him. Neighbors stood clustered along the sidewalks, conversations dropping to whispers as he passed. A man leaning on a mailbox smirked. Didn't think they were taking packages from that company now, he said just loud enough for James to hear. James kept walking, but his jaw tightened. He'd learned long ago that feeding their curiosity only gave them more to chew on. From the balcony, Mrs. Cartwright's curtain shifted. She was watching again. He wondered if she was remembering all the times she'd seen this scene play out years ago and stayed behind the glass. As he reached the van, 2 teenagers on bikes rolled by, slowing enough to get a good look. One snickered. Hey, you that guy from the Cartwright's place? James didn't answer. He climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and let the hum of the motor drown them out. Back up. Inside the house, the girl moved to the window, peering through the curtain at the small crowd. They're all talking about him already, she said quietly. Mrs. Cartwright joined her. Of course they are. This neighborhood feeds on other people's business, and James, she shook her head. James has always been a story they couldn't let go of. The girl frowned. But they don't even know what happened. They just believe whatever sounds good. Her grandmother's voice was dry. That's how it works, dear. Truth is slow. Gossip is lightning. Outside, a woman in yoga gear was already recording on her phone, pointing discreetly toward James's van. Another neighbor leaned in to say something, both of them laughing. Mrs. Cartwright's hand tightened on the curtain. If they turn this into something ugly. They? The girl asked, raising an eyebrow. You mean you too? Back then? Her grandmother didn't answer. Right away. I didn't spread lies, but I didn't stop them either. The girl let the curtain fall. Maybe you should have. In the driveway, James shifted the van into gear, but didn't move. He could feel the weight of their eyes on him. It wasn't just the stairs, it was the memory of what those stairs could do. He'd walked away from places like this before, but somehow today felt different. His phone buzzed on the dashboard. A text from an unknown number lit the screen. You should watch yourself around here. He stared at it, expression unreadable. Then, another text followed. Some people don't forget. His gaze lifted to the houses around him. Identical facades hiding generations of grudges. In the sitting room, the girl spoke before she could talk herself out of it. Grandma, if what James said is true, about Dad, about the cops, then that means the people here basically ruined his life. Mrs. Cartwright exhaled. Yes, and I let it happen. That's the truth I've been living with. The girl hesitated, then blurted, then maybe we should do something now. Her grandmother looked at her, a spark of hope and fear in her eyes. What do you have in mind? Outside, James finally put the van in reverse, backing slowly out of the driveway. He didn't wave, didn't glance back. But in the reflection of the rearview mirror, he caught sight of the girl still watching from the window, her expression different now. Troubled. The crowd parted reluctantly as he passed, their murmurs following him until he turned the corner and was gone from sight. But the neighborhood wasn't done with him. Not yet. Jordan stood outside on the porch, the autumn wind rattling the brittle leaves at his feet. Inside, he could still hear the murmured voices. Emily's grandmother insisting she knew him, Emily whispering that it was impossible. He didn't want to listen. He told himself to let it go. But the way her voice had cracked when she'd said his name, his real name, not the one on the order slip, gnawed at him. The door creaked open behind him. Jordan, the old woman's voice called softly. He turned. Her sharp blue eyes met his, watery but intent. Come inside, please. I think I have something for you. Jordan hesitated. Emily appeared beside her, arms folded. Grandma, maybe now isn't. Emily, the old woman interrupted. Bring the box from my closet. Emily frowned but went. Jordan followed them back inside. The living room smelled faintly of cinnamon and something old, like the pages of a forgotten book. Emily disappeared down the hall and returned with a small wooden chest, worn at the corners. The grandmother's thin fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside lay photographs, black and white, edges curled with age, and a faded cloth patch, with an eagle and shield embroidered in gold thread. Jordan's breath caught. I knew a man, she began, voice distant, as though speaking across decades. His name was Elijah Turner. He saved my husband's life during the war. Her gaze lifted to Jordan. You have his eyes. Jordan's throat went dry. He remembered the stories his grandfather told about the soldier he'd been named after, a man who never came home. Emily shifted uncomfortably. Grandma, this doesn't mean, her grandmother cut her off. It means, she said firmly, that this young man's family once protected ours, and we owe them more than Aven. We can never repay. Jordan swallowed hard. Elijah Turner was my grandfather's father, he said quietly. He died before my grandfather was born. The old woman nodded slowly, as if confirming something she'd always suspected. Emily's eyes darted. Between them, the defensive smirk she'd worn earlier completely gone. Wait, you're saying my great-grandfather? And your family? The grandmother placed a fragile hand on Jordan's arm. Our histories are bound together, whether we realized it or not. And I will not stand by while my family disrespects yours. Jordan's chest felt tight, not from anger this time, but from the strange weight of connection. Emily looked down, her face pale. I didn't know, she muttered. Now you do, her grandmother replied sharply. And you'll act accordingly. The room was silent except for the ticking of the old clock on the mantel. Jordan reached into the chest and gently lifted the faded patch. The threads were fraying, but the gold still shone faintly in the lamplight. My grandfather never had anything of his father's, he said softly. Would it be all right if I... The grandmother smiled faintly, tears welling in her eyes. It belongs with you. Emily watched the exchange, something unreadable in her expression. Shame, perhaps, or the first flicker of understanding. Jordan tucked the patch carefully into his jacket pocket. Thank you, he said. His voice was steady now. You have his courage, she whispered. Jordan wasn't sure about courage, but he knew one thing. Whatever resentment he'd carried into this house tonight had shifted into something else. Something heavier, but also more human. As he stepped toward the door, Emily spoke up. Jordan, wait. He turned, half expecting another awkward apology. But she just looked at him for a long moment before saying, I'll make it right. Jordan didn't answer. He simply nodded and walked out into the crisp night air. Old patch warm in his pocket, and the weight of history pressing on his heart. The silence in the room was so heavy, it felt like the air itself had thickened. Kayla sat stiffly on the couch, her eyes darting from her grandmother to Jamal, who stood near the doorway, his delivery bag still slung over his shoulder. Grandma Martha's hands trembled as she reached for the teacup on the table, but she didn't drink. Instead, she placed it back down, the porcelain clinking softly against the saucer. "Kayla," she said slowly, her voice cracking, "I need you to listen, and listen well." Jamal's brows furrowed. He was unsure whether to leave or stay, but something in Martha's tone kept him rooted in place. "You see this young man?" Grandma continued, gesturing toward Jamal. "He's not just some delivery driver who knocked on our door tonight. He is connected to our family in ways." "You don't know?" Kayla frowned, clearly confused. "Connected? How?" Grandma Martha took a deep breath, her gaze going distant, as though she were watching a scene play out in her mind. "When I was about your age," she began, "the world was even harsher than it is now. I lived in a small southern town where the rules were clear and cruel, especially for people of color." Her voice quivered, but she pushed on. "There was a boy. His name was Isaiah Carter. He was smart, kind, and could make anyone laugh. He also happened to be black. My father didn't like that I spoke to him. He said I was forgetting my place, but I didn't care. Isaiah was my friend. No, more than that. He was my first love." Kayla's jaw dropped. "Wait, Grandma, you dated—" "I loved him," Martha interrupted gently. "But our families would never allow it. Then one summer, something happened. There was a flood in our town. Isaiah risked his life to save people, even those who had treated him badly. One of those people was my father." Jamal's eyes softened. "That sounds a lot like the man I heard stories about from my grandmother." Martha's head snapped toward him. "What was your grandmother's name?" "Ruth Carter," Jamal said quietly. Martha gasped, her eyes welling with tears. "Ruth, Isaiah's little sister." Kayla's mouth fell open. "Wait, are you saying—" "Yes," Martha whispered. "This young man is Isaiah's grandson." The words hit the room like a thunderclap. Kayla stared at Jamal in disbelief. Jamal himself felt the ground shift beneath him. He had grown up hearing about his grandfather, the man who had stood tall in the face of injustice, but he had never known about the white girl in his life who had cared for him so deeply. "Grandma," Martha clasped her hands tightly. "Kayla, the man you mocked tonight was family to me in every way that mattered. And his grandson just stood at our door, showing more grace than most people I know. You owe him far more than an apology." Kayla's cheeks burned with shame. I didn't know." "That's the point, dear," Martha said firmly. "Ignorance isn't an excuse. It's a chain. And the only way to break it is to see people, truly see them, for who they are, not the color of their skin." Jamal finally spoke, his voice steady but soft. "Your grandmother. She was brave. She took risks in a time when kindness like that could cost a person everything. I didn't know this part of the story. I think maybe we were meant to meet tonight." Martha smiled faintly. "Maybe so." Kayla's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Jamal. I was horrible to you. I see that now." Can I make it right?" Jamal hesitated, then nodded. "Start by meaning those words. Actions come next." Grandma Martha leaned back in her chair, a strange peace settling over her face. "Isaiah would be proud to see this moment," she murmured. Two people who started on opposite sides, finding their way to understanding. The clock on the wall ticked softly as the weight of history, personal and painful, hung between them. The night wasn't over, but something inside the house had shifted, and in that quiet space, where past and present met, the first fragile threads of reconciliation began to weave together. The air in Deshawn's tiny living room was heavy with silence. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen broke through the quiet. His apartment was simple: mismatched furniture, a frayed rug, a single couch pushed against the wall. Yet there was something warm about it. The faint scent of cinnamon and wood polish lingered like a memory. Emily shifted uncomfortably near the doorway, still unsure why she had come here. Margaret, her grandmother, sat on the couch, hands gripping her cane so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her eyes darted around the room, scanning every corner as if searching for a ghost. Deshawn placed 2 mugs of tea on the coffee table. "It's not much, but it's what I have," he said softly, his deep voice carrying both hesitation and curiosity. Margaret didn't touch the tea. Instead, she leaned forward, her eyes fixed on a small wooden box sitting on the shelf across the room. "That box," she whispered, pointing with a trembling finger. "Deshawn, can I see it?" He frowned, clearly confused, but walked over and carefully took the box down. It was old, the wood darkened with age, corners worn smooth. A rusty latch kept it closed. Deshawn hesitated. "This belonged to my grandmother. I haven't opened it in years." Margaret's breath caught in her throat. "Please, open it." Emily's brow furrowed. "Grandma, what's going on?" Ignoring her, Margaret's gaze stayed locked on the box. With a sigh, Deshawn clicked the latch open. The lid creaked as it lifted, releasing a faint smell of old paper and cedar. Inside were stacks of yellowed letters, a tarnished silver locket, and a single black and white photograph resting on top. Margaret reached for the photo with shaking hands. She stared at it for a long moment before the sound escaped her lips. Not a scream this time, but a choked gasp. "Dear Lord?" she whispered. Emily leaned over her shoulder. The photo showed a young white woman in a summer dress standing beside a black man in a military uniform, both smiling, their arms around each other like old friends. Or something more. "That's you," Emily realized, staring at the woman in the photo. She looked just like a younger version of her grandmother. The same sharp cheekbones, same bright eyes. Margaret's lips trembled. "And that is David? David?" Deshawn asked, his voice suddenly tighter. Margaret nodded slowly. "David Carter, my first love, and your grandfather." The room seemed to freeze. Emily's mouth fell open. Deshawn blinked as if trying to process words that didn't make sense. Margaret clutched the locket in the box and opened it. Inside was a faded photo of the same man, David, but this time holding a baby. "That's my father," Deshawn said slowly, his voice unsteady. Margaret's eyes welled with tears. "I thought he was gone forever. They told me he'd left, that he wanted nothing to do with me. But the truth was buried." Emily felt her own chest tighten. She looked between them, her grandmother and the man she had mocked just days ago, realizing that they weren't strangers at all. Deshawn swallowed hard, his jaw clenched. "If this is true, then that makes you," Margaret nodded before he could finish, "your grandmother, and Emily, your cousin." Emily stepped back, stunned. The memory of her cruel words to Deshawn outside the coffee shop hit her like a punch. Shame burned through her, and she couldn't even meet his eyes. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of years, secrets, and lies filled the room. Margaret finally broke the silence. "There's more," she said, reaching deeper into the box. She pulled out a letter, the envelope yellowed and fragile, but the ink still legible. She opened it and began to read aloud. "My dearest Margaret, if you're reading this, it means the world tried to keep us apart. But I never stopped loving you. If I can't come back to you, I pray that one day our families will meet and know the truth." Margaret's voice cracked as she read. By the end of the letter, tears streamed down her cheeks. Deshawn sat down slowly, as if his legs could no longer hold him. He stared at the photograph again, his mind racing. Emily swallowed the lump in her throat. I didn't know," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. Deshawn looked at her, his expression unreadable. Now you do. The sound of rain tapping against the window filled the silence that followed. Outside, the streetlights glowed. Against the wet pavement, their reflections shimmering like broken pieces of the past. Margaret held the photo close to her chest. It's time we finish this story, all of it. Emily nodded, her eyes still fixed on Deshawn. For the first time, she didn't see him as just the delivery guy. She saw him as family and as someone who deserved far more than what the world had given him. And yet, she also knew the hardest part was still ahead. Evelyn's hands trembled as she gripped the armrests of her chair. Her gaze darted from her granddaughter Emily to the tall young man standing awkwardly in the doorway. Marcus. The room was so quiet, you could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I think it's time you all know, Evelyn began, her voice breaking like old wood under weight. Emily shifted uncomfortably. Know what, Grandma? What's going on? Evelyn inhaled deeply, her eyes locked on Marcus. Your name, your last name, is it Carter? Marcus nodded cautiously. Yes, ma'am, Marcus Carter. A shudder passed through Evelyn. Then I was right. She paused, glancing at Emily before continuing. Marcus, I knew your father. I knew him well. And I owe him more than anyone here can imagine. Emily blinked, utterly confused. Wait, you know him? How? And why did you scream his name like that? Evelyn's voice turned low, steady, as if she were speaking to ghosts as much as to the living. It was 1968. I was a young woman working in the city when the riots broke out. The streets were chaos fires, shouting, people running everywhere. I was caught in the middle. I thought I was going to die that night, until a young black man pulled me into an alley and shielded me from a group of men who wanted to hurt me. Her eyes glistened. That man was Michael Carter, Marcus's father. Marcus's expression shifted, a mix of surprise and grief. My father never told me about that. He wouldn't have, Evelyn said softly. He didn't save me for recognition. He risked his life for a stranger, in a time when white and black folks were told to hate each other. He got beaten badly that night because of me. I visited him in the hospital for weeks. We became friends, real friends. But when I moved away to marry your grandfather, we lost touch. Emily's jaw tightened. So, you're telling me, the guy I just made fun of, the guy I laughed at, is the son of the man who saved your life? Yes, Evelyn said, the word heavy with meaning. And that's why, Emily, what you did was not only cruel, it was ignorant. You mocked him without knowing the blood that runs in his veins. Blood of a hero. Marcus shifted on his feet. His voice was quiet, almost unsure. I didn't know any of that either. My dad died when I was young. Mom mentioned he had a tough past, but never details. Evelyn nodded. Your father's story is part of mine, and yours. Which is why we're here, all of us, standing at a crossroads between repeating history's mistakes or honoring the people who broke through them. Emily's face flushed with shame. Her earlier confidence was gone, replaced by something raw. I didn't mean. I wasn't thinking. I thought I was just being funny. Evelyn's voice hardened. Racism is never just funny, Emily. Words have weight. And sometimes the people you hurt are carrying stories you couldn't imagine. A thick silence settled. Emily's eyes darted to Marcus, who still looked stunned. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, unable to form. An apology. Evelyn leaned forward. Emily, you need to decide right now, are you going to be the person who judges others on the surface, or the person who digs deep enough to know their worth? Emily swallowed hard. I want to do better. I need to. She looked at Marcus. I'm sorry. Really, I didn't know. Marcus hesitated before nodding slowly. I believe you. But it's not about me forgiving you. It's about you understanding why it hurt in the first place. Evelyn closed her eyes, as if relieved that something long buried had finally been spoken aloud. "We all carry pieces of the past," she said. "Some are painful, some are beautiful. But if we hide them, we risk letting the ugliness repeat itself." Marcus took a deep breath. "I wish I'd known my dad better." Hearing this, it makes me proud. And it makes me want to keep his memory alive. Emily's voice was almost a whisper. "Then maybe we can start over?" Marcus studied her for a moment, then gave a faint smile. "Maybe. But starting over means you have to listen, not just speak." Evelyn's eyes shone with quiet pride. "That's the first step toward real change. Listening." The air in the room shifted lighter, but still fragile. They all knew this conversation wasn't the end, but the beginning of something they hadn't expected. A chance to rewrite the story. Between them, the courtroom-like silence in the living room was broken only by the ticking of the antique clock on the mantel. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and yet there was something electric in the air, the sense that the final piece of a long, complicated puzzle was about to fall into place. Grandma Evelyn's eyes didn't leave Marcus. Her wrinkled hand trembled as it reached forward, not for the cane beside her, but for his hand. "You were just a boy," she said, her voice cracking. "A boy who should never have been in the middle of what happened that night." Marcus swallowed hard, unsure whether to speak or just let her memory unfold. "Mrs. Thompson." "Evelyn, I wasn't the only one there," he said softly. "But I couldn't just stand by." All eyes darted between them, the young white teen Claire shifting uneasily in her seat. Evelyn's gaze grew distant, her voice now trembling with both age and the weight of recollection. "It was 1978. I was coming home from work late. At night. Back then, a white woman walking alone downtown was, well, not safe, but for very different reasons. A group of men decided I was an easy target. They cornered me in an alley." Claire's mouth opened slightly, shocked. "That's when Marcus's father and Marcus, barely 12 at the time, saw me," Evelyn continued. "They didn't hesitate. His father stood between me and those men, while Marcus ran to get help. If they hadn't been there," her voice cracked completely now, "I wouldn't be here. And Claire, neither would you." The teen's face flushed red, shame heating her cheeks. I didn't know," she whispered. "You didn't want to know," Marcus replied quietly, though without venom. "It's easier to make someone into a stereotype than to see them." As a person with a story, Evelyn squeezed his hand. "Your father was never thanked properly, Marcus. He faced suspicion instead. Some people accused him of being involved in the trouble just because of the color of his skin. And yet, he still helped. That bravery, it's in you." Tears welled in Marcus's eyes. "I learned from him. And I never forgot you, Mrs. Thompson. I just didn't think you'd remember me." Claire sat frozen, guilt pressing down on her chest. "I treated you like you were nothing," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I made fun of you in front of everyone, but you, your family, saved mine." Marcus turned to her, his tone measured but firm. "An apology is a start, but the real change comes from what you do next." Silence lingered for a moment before Evelyn spoke again, her voice regaining its strength. "Marcus, I want you to know, from this day forward, you will always be welcome here. And Claire," her voice sharpened slightly, "you will be working alongside Marcus at the community center this summer." "No arguments." Claire blinked in shock. "Wait, with him?" "Yes, with him," Evelyn said with finality. "Consider it your lesson in seeing people as more than labels. And Marcus," she smiled gently, "you'll teach her. You have more to give than she realizes." Marcus let out a short laugh. "Guess I just got a promotion." The tension finally broke into a small wave of chuckles. Even Claire cracked a reluctant smile as Marcus stood to leave. Evelyn pulled him into a hug, holding him longer than expected. "Tell your father." "I still owe him a pie," she whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek. When Marcus stepped outside, the evening air felt lighter, freer. The package was finally delivered, but something far more important had been exchanged inside: truth, gratitude, and the beginnings of reconciliation. Claire watched from the doorway as Marcus walked down the path. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, but she ignored it. She knew she had something bigger to focus on now. "Hey, Marcus," she called after him. He turned, eyebrows raised. "I'm sorry," she said, louder this time, "and thank you." For a moment, Marcus simply studied her. Then he nodded once, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "See you this summer, kid." As he disappeared into the fading light, Evelyn placed a hand on her granddaughter's shoulder. "You see, Claire, kindness echoes through generations. The good we do or fail to do never really disappears." And in that quiet suburban street, under the glow of the setting sun, an old wound finally began to heal.